Welcome to the Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, a production of LibertyNation.com, hosted by Mark Angelides.
The destruction of culture and history is about as slippery a slope as you can get. We see villainous enemies of freedom have taken it upon themselves to burn books, or as we're seeing even today in the supposedly enlightened age, tear down statues. But fear not, for this is all, apparently, in the name of progress. We should rightly ask, though, progress towards what end? We have Black Lives Matter activists and the loose-knit supporters demanding the taking down and the destruction of statues, the renaming of streets, in fact, the very erasure of history. It seems that this progress would be aimed at a completely new world. And there's nothing wrong with the idea of starting a new world, not inherently, no. But there is a problem when this new world would be controlled by the self-same folk who have decided to eviscerate the history and the culture of the existing one. Book burners and history deniers are rife in the distant and not so distant past, yet this blinkered vision of believing you can destroy a book and still be on the correct side of history shows the activists for just what they are, ignorant of history. It's not less history we need, but more. It is not fewer ties to the past and the understanding that that brings that we require, but more. Has there ever been a case in history where we look back and praise those who put the past to the torch? In the UK and the US, statues are being torn down. The phrase, decolonize your bookshelf, is making its way into common parlance, with even some writers pushing this dangerous concept. Certain books are not being republished at the behest of activists, libraries are choosing not to stock various tomes, and private citizens are being pilloried for the books that they have on their shelves. What is to become of these poor books that are no longer socially acceptable? They will end up on the pyre. The German poet and contemporary of Karl Marx, Heinrich Heine, perhaps put it best when he wrote, quote, "That was but a prelude where they burn books. They will ultimately burn people as well." End quote. Not surprisingly, the Nazis tried to erase him from history. But this brings us to the very truth of the matter. Books are a reflection of a writer. They're the ephemeral thoughts of a man or woman made flesh. Destroying a book, tearing out its pages, is never enough to silence an actual idea. They are the messengers, not the message. So, what comes next? What is the next step when the ideas in books are spoken aloud by those who have no recourse to the page? Well, we don't have to speculate to answer this question. We saw the answer in the last century in Germany, in Warsaw, in communist Russia. It's but one step away. And if these closet fascists took the time to learn history instead of using it as a political tool to further an anti-democratic agenda, they would perhaps not be so keen to begin the short journey down this dark, dark path. As John Milton wrote in 1644, quote, "Books are not absolutely dead things, but do contain a potency of life in them as to be as active as the soul whose progeny they are. Who kills a man kills a reasonable creature, but he who destroys a good book kills reason itself." End quote. On April 8th, 1933, there began in Germany a campaign to destroy all the books that were deemed bad. It was called the Action Against the Un-German Spirit, and was a cooperation between the German Student Union and their Press and Propaganda Office. It was supposed to be a purification of the language and the expiation of all things considered deviant. Is this so different from today? The censorship is being driven by not only those on the political left, but also their advocates in the media. The purification they seek today is to remove all reference to history that they abhor. But whether or not these statues, books, or buildings fit in with their push to shift the Overton window, they must understand the tradition they're following. Just 1 month after this push to burn books began, the students, they were addressed by the infamous Minister of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels. He said, quote, "As a young person, to already have the courage to face the pitiless glare, to overcome the fear of death, and to regain respect for death, This is the task of this young generation. And thus you do well in this midnight hour to commit to the flames the evil spirit of the past. This is a strong, great, and symbolic deed, a deed which should document the following for the world to know. Here, the intellectual foundation of the November Republic is sinking to the ground, but from the wreckage, the phoenix of a new spirit will triumphantly rise." End quote. Does this sound familiar? Committing to flames the spirit of the past, the new spirit triumphantly rising. These modern-day protesters are mixing in very, very poor company. But here's the rub. This time, these fascists, they can't actually win. Those who live by the sword die by the sword. If this persistence in tearing down statues and destroying books continues, how long will it be before those who oppose the madness start playing by the same rules? Karl Marx defended slavery. There goes the Communist Manifesto. The Islamic prophet Muhammad kept slaves. Isn't the Quran a book of his words? Gandhi considered blacks inferior. And what's to stop a statue fight back? What's to prevent private citizens from putting statues on their own property? This is an unwinnable war because you can't use an eraser on select parts of history. The past must be accepted, learned from, and the people of today made stronger and more resilient by those lessons. The erasure of history creates one thing: ignorance. If these censorial proto-fascists chose to learn history rather than destroy it, we could together focus on building a better future for us all. Thank you for listening to The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose. Find us on the web by searching Liberty Nation News.
Go deeper on the topic discussed in this video, head on over to one of these links here or go to our Liberty Nation Roku channel. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for Liberty.
The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, a LibertyNation.com production.
Available at Libsyn, Apple iTunes, Stitcher, on Roku, and other fine podcast providers.